only had 259 yards off of scrambles. There was no quarterback threat if the passing game didn't get open, right? And now in 5 games, Miami already has more than half of that, almost more than 2/3 of that. And so that I think is a huge element of King being an athlete, but also Rhett Lashlee saying, hey, if it's not there, dude, go for it. And so I think that's really, really good. I think the biggest issue with Miami's offense this year is this stat here. King in a clean pocket on passes that are in front of the line of scrimmage, he is completing 47.3% of those passes. Overall, he's completing 55.3% of his passes. So a substantial drop off when we filter out kind of those screens and behind the line of scrimmage passes. And so if I'm, thinking about what's sustainable going forward, I'm a little worried that the downfield threat is not as developed as it was with Lashlee at SMU last year. And specifically that the Miami offense is not as multiple as the SMU offense was last year, in that there are, you have Cameron Harris and you have Brevin Jordan, 2 really, really good options. But it doesn't look like Miami has just kind of found the way to punish teams for committing to either of them to move the ball consistently. Because if you create kind of this mental model about college football offensive success, you think about moving the ball consistently enough to generate opportunities for big plays. Because most of the time, as you guys know, big plays require a missed tackle or a matchup getting exploited. And so a lot of that is random. And the best way to increase your probability of getting a big play is to run a lot of plays. And so Miami's running tempo, which is great. And they're getting some big plays because of that. But they're not as, it doesn't seem like their potential is fully realized yet, just with that multiplicity. Yeah. I will say, putting the top bun on my compliment sandwich here, Miami has 731 yards after the catch in 5 games this year. Last season, they only had 1,500. Okay. So over 5 games compared to 12 games, I guess that's including a bowl last year. So 5 games compared to 13 games, Miami is over halfway to the yards after catch they have. And so I think that is where you can kind of see the influence of Lashlee. Lashlee loves to find a guy who will get down the field, and he loves to get him the ball quickly and let him go and then line up quickly and go again. And so I think that is where you can be encouraged by Lashlee, just saying, hey, King isn't as accurate downfield as we like. That downfield threat's not there, but we're still finding ways to get the ball to guys in space and let them take advantage of catching the ball and then running downfield.
Okay. Well, and I think that, you pretty much answered my next question that I was going to ask you. And Jordan, I wanted to ask you this too. So one of the biggest issues with this offense has been the lack of production from our receivers. It's been it's been ridiculous. That's why we're having like an open wide receiver competition right now for the starting jobs. But so Jordan, I don't know if you have noticed this last few games, but it seems like King is throwing way too many deep passes and they're not being completed. Yeah. And I was expecting a lot more speed routes, drags, things like that we saw a little bit on Saturday with Mark Pope. And then we also saw a little bit against UAB. Jordan, have you noticed that?
I have. And, I've actually been wondering if possibly it's because, Lashlee has to have realized, just like a lot of us have, that we're reliant on big plays because our offense really isn't doing much besides that. So I wonder if he's trying to dial those up more often now that he's seeing, like, we're getting – our offensive line is getting beat at the point of contact. We're not running the ball as well as we were. We're not protecting the passer as well as we were. De'Aaron King has had accuracy issues. Our receivers are dropping balls. So I wonder if he's taking more shots in effort to try to build more momentum and capitalize on our big playability. So, other than that, I don't know, but that would be my guess.
So, and before the season, I was expecting a lot of, quick passing, things like that, just to, build the confidence of King and also help out the offensive line a lot more. Parker, were you expecting a little bit more of that? Or do you think that we're trying to throw the deep ball too much?
So I'm looking at this in real time, so forgive me if this is a little raw. Derek King is 76th out of qualified quarterbacks in downfield deep ball passing completion rate. he's completing only 23.3% of his balls that travel more than 20 yards in the air, which is 76 in the nation. And looking at the percent of deep balls, he is at about 19%. And so he is at 30th in percentage of deep balls. So I think there's actually a lot of data to substantiate that hypothesis. And again, I like being aggressive. I think it's smart to be aggressive. I think you can be smart about being aggressive, though. And it does look like that I would expect someone as competent with offense as Rhett Lashlee to kind of say, okay, this isn't working exactly like we want. Maybe we can find that, 10 to 15 yard range of balls and find some more timing and connection with King instead of going for the deep shot every, so 19 times, 1 out of every 5 passes. I think there will be a little bit of equalizing there, equilibrium there, just saying, hey, I want Derek King to be this dual threat, amazing runner and downfield passer. He and the wide receivers haven't clicked yet. So perhaps we can kind of pull back on the downfield threat and increase that kind of 10 to 15 yard range, which would be beneficial, I think, for the offense in efficiency, which again, efficiency is just a vehicle for explosion. We know that Miami's offense is explosive. If you can increase your efficiency, you're only going to increase your explosiveness.
Okay. Well, Parker, I have a question for you, and this might come off as an extreme hot take, but there's a very specific narrative within the Miami Hurricanes fan base about which side of the ball is better than the other. But I want to ask you this question after watching us for 5 games and looking at the stats and stuff. Which side of the ball would you be more confident in as a Miami fan right now, offense or defense?
Oh, Miami's defense by leaps and bounds. And I think you might be setting me up because I'm pretty sure I came on this podcast and said I was worried about it. And I was wrong. Yeah. Quincy Roche is awesome. I will eat crow on that all day. Miami's defense has been so good. They're 16th in SP+. They're allowing success on only 39.6 of plays. I think Miami's defense is way better than I had any reason to expect. And so I'm definitely here to eat crow on that.
Well, I wasn't trying to set you up.
I deserve it.
No. Well, I mean, we all think that, you watch the defense and it's very evident what the weaknesses are, I guess our corners have gotten a lot better since week 1. But I feel like the run defense has been kind of soft in the middle. Our linebacking play has been absolutely terrible. It's gotten better as younger players have gotten more reps. But our original starters to begin the year were not very good. But the reason why I brought that up is because the narrative within the team is the defensive coordinator, Blake Baker, has kind of been used as the scapegoat of all of our problems this season. And not that I disagree and think that Blake Baker is like a positive influence on the team. I'm not necessarily going to go there. But I really think that I'm not sure he's a negative either. Like our defense against Clemson, our defense got the stops that it needed. Against Pitt, our defense got the stops that it needed. I don't know. I really don't think that side of the ball is as big of a problem as people think. And I think people are kind of giving the offense a little bit of a break when maybe it doesn't deserve it. I mean, we need more consistency up front. I think the offensive line is getting more credit than it deserves, and I don't know, man. It's very interesting, but I'm not so surprised to hear you say that. I that's actually what I was hoping that you'd say.
Yeah, well, and my first instinct there is, what side of the ball is Manny Diaz most associated with?
Defense.
So I don't know why you're gonna throw your defensive coordinator under the bus, knowing that that's kind of your specialty. I will say of the guys who have taken the most consistent snaps on Miami's defense, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the top 10 have grades under 70, and 4 of the top 10 have grades under 60. So like, according to that's PFF grades, just general, how did you perform on any given play, kind of relative to expectations. And so there have been some serious holes on the Miami defense in terms of consistent down-to-down play, but the unit overall has improved. And again, I would throw out basically everything against Clemson. Like that stinks because they're in your conference, and TCU, for instance, had to deal with that with Oklahoma for a while, and just say like, look, games against Oklahoma, if we win, it's going to be a shocking upset. Otherwise, right now, we're not there. We're not on that level. And so I think I would almost throw out everything that happened versus Clemson and focus on the Pitt, the Louisville, the Florida State, and say, hey, what's kind of happening there? And realistically, Miami's defense has been fine and done more than enough in those situations to provide the offense opportunities to win.
Yeah. Yeah, and that kind of gets to a thing. You know, I've really been people within the Miami fan base are not exactly happy with me because I've been a little more negative, especially for a 4-1 team. But coming into this season, we were, like Marsh and I discussed here on this podcast, the possibility of having a top 30 offense and a top 30 defense in the same year, and thinking, you know, like those kind of teams are the ones that are competing for playoff spots, right? The ones that are very good on both sides of the ball. I mean, we've had a top 30 defense for, 5 years in a row now.
Top 20?
Yeah. So, you know, we were thinking that if Rhett Lashley could get us there, but I mean, the problem and why it's not always why I'm not jumping for joy when we barely beat Pitt's backup quarterback is because, I mean, I haven't looked at the stats, but I would be shocked if we're top 30 on either side of the ball right now. And that's, I mean, we might be because the Big Ten and Pac-12 haven't played any games, but in a normal season, I don't know if we'd be there right now. And that's kind of disappointing to me. I mean, especially coming into this season with those expectations of, you know, hey, we might lose 2 games. We'll probably only lose 1. So.
Yeah, well, and I think it's important to note, like what you said, not many teams have played. So Miami's 16th on defensive SP+, and that's a metric that accounts for opponent. So if Clemson beats you pretty badly, which they do to everyone, you're not going to get penalized as much there. But I will say, you know, I think Miami did something great in that the way the stats worked in the Louisville game, that was actually an expected loss for Miami. They had a 43% post-game win expectancy there, just given, you know, basic, hey, here's how the box score worked out. How often does a team win a game? And it actually looks like that might have been an expected loss, and they stole a win there. Miami only has 2 projected losses on the schedule going forward, at Virginia Tech and then North Carolina at home. I think North Carolina is still based on some preseason projections. I actually don't put a lot of faith in that. So it's realistic that Miami loses no more than 2 and potentially none of their games going forward. And so that puts you at what, 9-2 on the season? Yeah. 9-1 if they go undefeated, potentially worst case 7-2 if they lose both of the games they're supposed to. I mean, you got to feel really, really good at that, given Miami was 6-7 last year and 7-6 in 2018. Yeah. That like relative expectations matter. Nobody flips the switch overnight and starts winning, you know, going to the playoff every year. Progress in college football is linear and it's path dependent. And Miami has hired someone on offense who can develop. They've brought in a grad transfer to kind of ice over this year and make sure they get the development and the non-quarterback positions they need. They're going to have to find a quarterback. That's the next big deal, right? Mm-hmm. What's going to happen going forward? But this year, you win 8 games. I mean, you win 7 games and only, you know, lose 2 or 3. You got to feel really, really good about the direction of the Miami program.
Yeah, I mean, I projected us to go 8-3, and looking ahead, I mean, that Virginia Tech game scares me. UNC, I don't know, because I don't know which UNC team is going to show up, and I'm excited about the future of this program, but I'm not quite sold where we can win out here in the regular season, just because of 15 years of tortured fandom. I did want to ask you, because you're a big analytic guy. I wanted to ask you first, when looking at a quarterback and judging, you know, whether or not a quarterback's good, what are some of the most overrated statistics that football fans use?
Okay, so I mentioned this earlier, and I'm on a warpath right now about this. Touchdown to interception ratio is so dumb. And it's so dumb because it throws away all of this information we have about a quarterback. It says, oh no, I'm just going to boil it down to 20 throws. And so I think that's really, 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 really dumb. I have some metrics with some data that I'm not necessarily allowed to share right now that I'm very excited about, with like completion percentage over expectation, because I think the way you need to look at a quarterback, and so you may not be able to, you know, calculate this for every quarterback, but mentally you can kind of go through this, is saying, hey, how far down the field is he throwing the ball? What's the situation? Is it third down and long? Is it first down and short? What is he doing there? How far down the field is he throwing the ball? How hard is that pass? And how